Hello on Wednesday, my friends. Welcome to the Medium in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, the Medium in the Middle. On this podcast, I share my journey as a developing psychic medium, as a Reiki master teacher, as an Akashic record practitioner, and anything else that's thrown my way. Hello, everybody. That is right. We are here on Wednesday, our new home on Wednesdays. So in an effort to have a real day off, I am rearranging my schedule, which will give me Mondays off, Tuesdays to record, Wednesdays to release. So Medium in the Middle is moving to a Wednesday release day. So there will be new episodes every Wednesday in your ears. But hello, my name is Stephanie. I am the Medium in the Middle, and this is episode 126. So how to have a real day off has been on my mind for all of 2022. It's one of my goals this year to take a day off a week. When you're building a business and you work for yourself, it is very, very hard to set that boundary. And I feel like I'm good with so many boundaries, but work is not one that I'm strong with. There's always something to do. There's always something I could be doing. There's always something I could be working on. I could be setting myself up for success. But seeing as it's May, I should be working towards this goal a little harder. So I always release the podcast on Tuesdays because 2.5 years ago when I started releasing podcasts, that was the day to release. That's when they tell you to release your podcast. It's the best day of the week. But now, 2.5 years later, I think that I can make a big CEO decision and move the podcast for my well-being and health and day offness. So we'll be releasing every Wednesday now. And I'm really proud of myself for making that change. So today I have 3 mini stories for you, a little psychic, a little mediumship. So since we are talking in the land of mediumship, this week I'm going to pull a card from the mediumship training deck. I really like this deck. I find it very helpful, and each time I pull one, I learn something. So this card this week is Spirit Communication Process. Spirit is your soul essence. It's the spark of the divine in the center of your being. It's the part of you that existed long before you incarnated into this physical form and will continue long after you leave this world. It's this very essence that mediums connect with during communication. From spirit, through spirit, to spirit is a common mantra that mediums use to remember the purpose and process of mediumship. It's the formula in which the energy of spirit flows during communication. It's the understanding that the soul essence of those departed connects to the soul essence of the medium, which then connects to the soul essence of the living recipient. In simple terms, it's a 3-way link. Medium in the middle. I really like that. I haven't heard that before. From spirit, through spirit, to spirit. Interesting. When this 3-way soul communication process is in perfect sync, there's a beautiful and seamless flow of communication filled with the energy of love and healing. To practice, simply sit across from your sitter who's open to connect with a departed loved one. As a medium, allow yourself a quiet moment to breathe and center yourself. Invite a loved one's spirit to draw close. Feel the presence of the spirit envelop you, allowing their soul essence to connect and merge with yours. Complete the connection by extending your energy to the soul's essence of the sitter. Be still for a moment in this wonderful flow of energy, sensing, feeling, and hearing. Share any information with your sitter for validation. Ooh, a spirit communication process. I really like that, the way that that's said. From spirit, through spirit, to spirit. So actually that card made me think of another really cute story. So I presented at the Banff Wellness Retreat the past 2 weekends, and it was really fun. On the first weekend, I presented on how to set spiritual and personal boundaries. And I also presented on listening to the universe. And on the second weekend, I got to present my favorite thing to present, Reiki and Chakras 101 and spirit communication. So for this time around with spirit communication, I did not do a mediumship reading. So we decided to pull that out because we want to offer more what can help people, not just a show. And mediumship sometimes can feel very much like a show. So I told everybody in that class if they wanted to see a mediumship reading, that a medium named Bree and I are doing a live mediumship reading at the end of this month, May 29th, here in Banff. It's called Mediums in the Mountains. There's 2 mediums reading the room. It is a 2.5-hour event. It's going to be amazing. And I separated it from the retreat for many, many reasons, but number one was energy output and just being able to prepare and have the time off before and after to really be able to have an amazing 2.5-hour session and then still be human afterwards. So that is really exciting. There are still tickets left, but they are over half sold out. So if you want to join us in Banff, May 29th, it's a Sunday from 2 to 4:30 p.m., come see us in real life. I'll leave the link down below in the show notes to buy tickets. But in that spirit communication class, a few things happened, and that's where some of the stories from today are going on. So after that class, it was the last one, I was leaving, and there was a few men actually at this retreat. So that was really nice. And there was a man there by himself in the class, and I could see him, paying attention, and I couldn't tell if he was into it or not. So when I was leaving, he was sitting at the bar, and he said to me, "That was interesting today. I've had a few experiences too." And I didn't know if it was an invitation to ask him anything. I was like, I'm going home. Do I just leave? I was like, no, Steph, probe. This might be a situation where he just needs to say something. So I was like, oh yeah? So I said, oh yeah? And he was like, yeah. When you were talking in there, I have a dog that's passed away. And someone asked about past animals. So I was talking about that. And he was like, just as you were talking, I felt a sensation like my dog who's passed away was licking my head. He's like, this never happened before. And I was like, ooh, cool. What a good sign. And he was like, yeah, interesting. And he's like, and after my mom passed away, I've been finding dimes everywhere. And he was like, and I started collecting them, and there's dimes now everywhere. I see them everywhere, no matter where I am. And I was like, yeah, that's a really good sign from Spirit to send you dimes. And it was interesting because this man was sitting in on my class just because he wanted to experience something different, listen to something new, try a new perspective. And he's like, I'm sitting here soaking it all in because I never considered the perspective that you offered today. I never thought about it really. He's like, but now it's really making me look at my life and see the signs that I do get. I do get things from my mom, and I do get things from my pet that's passed away. And I was sitting there just thinking this is everything. This is what it's all about, is not to convince you of mediumship or anything. It's just to get you thinking in another way and get you scanning your own life of, where does this happen to me? What do I experience? What do I pick up on? What are the signs from the universe? So it was a really, really cool conversation. I sat and talked with him for about 20 minutes. He told me how his daughter does Reiki, but she's never done it on him. And he was asking me if it really works. And I was like, yeah, it really works. You should get your daughter to try it on you. And these are the types of experiences that I love and conversations that I love to have, because it's awareness, right? That's what I'm always saying. It's just awareness. People's eyes are growing bigger. You're asking questions. You're wanting to know more. Even if you're listening to this podcast, there's a reason why you're here. So in that same spirit communication class, because last time I taught that class, I did do a mediumship reading. I was setting my boundaries at the beginning of the session, being like, Spirit, you're not coming in today, you're not inviting, kind of closing the door to them. And at that time, I had 3 women sit in the front row, and they're like, oh, we just want to sit in the front row because, we want to be here. And I was like, oh, I was literally just setting my boundaries and telling Spirit that no one can come through. This isn't a channeling session. If you thought it was, they're like, no, we just wanted to sit front row. And I was like, okay. So as part of my opening speech, I was talking and saying, just to clarify, this isn't a mediumship reading. I will be talking a lot about mediumship, but I'm not channeling souls today. And I'm telling you that, and I'm telling them that. And I pointed to the sky. But I had this one pesky soul. Of course, there's always one poking through. And I said, but, as I say that, I have one dad here who's looking for 3 girls. And I was like, I don't know if the 3 of you are sisters. I don't know what's going on, but there's 3 girls, and the dad's talking to them. I said, are there 3 sisters here who have a dad that's passed away? And of course, the girls in the front row raised their hand, and I said, you sneaky little guys sitting in the front row. I was like, of course your dad tried to sneak through. And then I talked about sway testing. I talked about, hearing messages for yourself. The course was a lot about how you can do this without mediums, how you don't need people like me, how to start listening for signs. So I taught the group how to sway test. And at the end, one of the group of 3 came up and they're like, well, we have 2 people passed. It could have been our grandpa or it could have been our dad. Who was it? And I went to go say, well, I'm not sure. And then I was like, wait, I can sway test. I just asked. So I sway tested it, figure out who it was, and it turned out to be who they thought it was. So that was a really cool experience. And it happened again the week prior when I was giving an example of something. And I was in class explaining what I do and how I'm a developing medium and just saying my boundaries are pretty strong, so spirit's not here. It's always dads that want to sneak through, and I don't know if that's just my bias. And then I kept tripping over the screen and I kept burping throughout my presentation and I kept joking and saying, oh, spirit's here. And I tripped 3 times and I kept burping and I was like, wow, like there really is a spirit here. And the crowd was like, tell us, tell us. I was like, okay, I have a dad here. He's for someone sitting on the left side of the room and his name, it sounds like Jerry. And no one really claimed it. And I was like, okay, I kept going. At the end, I had someone come up to me and she had tears in her eyes and she said, I think that was my dad. And I was like, oh, were you sitting on the left side of the room? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, is his name Jerry? I was like, I heard like J-E or G-E. And she was like, well, no, that's not his name. And I was like, okay, well, I heard that pretty strongly, like the J-E or the G-E, like that J sound. I'm like, the only name I can think of right now is Jerry, but that's what I heard. And she was like, oh, okay. And I was like, sorry, like I'm off. Like if they sneak through, that's kind of all I get. I'm not turning on to get more information. But if it is your dad, take it. If it's not, leave it. She's like, okay, like I don't think it is. And I was like, okay. So she left. And I was thinking to myself, like, it's interesting that I said the name Jerry because I've never said that name. And especially when it comes to channeling, we can only say names that we know, right? So I say John a lot. I say Susan a lot. I can say Amanda. I can say very like common names. But I was like kind of proud of myself. I was like, wow, I said the name Jerry. Like I usually don't say that. I would say like Gerald. I would say something different. But I was giving myself a moment of props to be like, that's a new name for me to hear. And then she came back and her eyes were really wide open. She's like, oh my gosh, I just thought. She's like, my dad's name it was a Mexican name. And she said, translated to English, she's like, his name means Jesus. She's like, J-E. And I was like, oh. And I was like, that's why I was hearing like Jerry. It was like probably Jesus or something like that. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Jesus, J-E. And I was like, even like Jesus kind of sounds like Jerry. Like that, like, dun dun name. It's very like sing-songy, right? We're not really, when you're talking to spirit, it's not the clearest line. And I was like, oh, interesting. So I was like, yes, okay, then I would take that as your dad. It's like, take that as your dad because that's pretty close. And she was like, really? And I said, yeah, of course. Like, no one else came up and said anything. And if you were sitting on that side and that made sense and you were thinking about him or maybe calling him in, like, take the sign. And it's interesting because in that class, I was talking about how we have to accept signs. We always go to mediums or people like me and we want our signs confirmed. But in the class, I was saying, don't wait for permission to confirm your signs. Just take them. If you asked to see an owl and then you saw an owl, that is the sign from mom. You don't need to go and ask a medium, hey, I asked for an owl from mom. I saw an owl. Do you think it was mom? And I know we laugh at that. You're probably laughing while you listen to this, but the amount of DMs that I get of people asking me that, people ask me those things all the time. And if you ask for something and you get it, of course it's a sign from your loved one. So take them, take them, take them. Don't wait for confirmation from someone like me, a psychic, a medium, to say, yes, it was mom. You know it was mom. And this last story that I have to share with you is kind of more of a psychic story. And this is probably the psychic story that we all want to hear because it's about meeting someone. And this one was really, really interesting. So I debated if I should share this on the podcast or not, but it's all in good fun. And if I'm sharing everything else about my life, I might as well share this. So I was at a big conference in between the two retreats. So I was at a conference Wednesday, Thursday, had the retreat on Friday, then a week went by and the next retreat was the next weekend. So 2 weeks before I went to this conference, my friends knew I was going to this conference because I had another friend coming to visit from Ontario and we were going to the conference together. And I was getting a Reiki treatment done from one of my friends. And at the end of the treatment, we were talking about the conference. Was I excited? All of those things. And I was like, yeah, I'm really excited to see my friend. It was actually Tara from the podcast who was coming. If you're an OG listener and remember Tara, that's her fake name. She was coming out to Banff, so it was really, really exciting. And I was talking with my friend, and I was like, yeah, I'm excited for the conference. It's going to be really good. It's going to be a crazy few days because I have the wellness retreat, yada, yada, yada. Just chatting. And she looks at me. She's packing up her things, and she's like, you're going to meet someone at the conference. And I smiled at her, and I said, yeah, I know. And then she was like, I don't know why I said that. And I was like, you know why you said that. So this friend of mine is very psychic, but she hasn't fully embraced it yet. So it was kind of like a little leak. I could see it leak out. And I laughed and I said, you know why you said that? And she was like, kind of like, oh my gosh, why did I say that? Where'd that come from? And I said, yeah, I know. I've had that feeling. I had 2 dreams about it. I know I'm going to meet someone there. He's going to be older. He's going to have a kid. He's going to have a good job. And he's not going to be from here. His kid's going to be a boy. And she was like, oh, how do you know that? And I was like, I get psychic information all the time. I was like, but I've had 2 dreams about it and just like this weird feeling. I just know. And she keeps packing up her things and she says, yeah, you're going to meet someone. So sure enough, 2 weeks later, I tell Tara this and I was like, oh, having psychic friends is fun. Apparently I'm going to meet someone at this conference. Ooh. And she was like, oh yeah, who? No. And I was like, I don't know. I just know he's going to be older. He's not going to be from here. He's going to have a good job and he's going to have a kid and he's going to be a boy. He has 1 son. And she was like, oh wow, like, okay, woohoo, like all excited. So after day 1, it was the Wednesday, I get a text message from my friend being like, you meet anyone today? And I was like, no, I don't think it's going to be today. I was like, if anything, it's going to be tomorrow at the gala because you're in session all day for the Wednesday and Thursday. But there was a gala Thursday night, dressing nice at the Fairmont Banff Springs, looking good. I was like, if I'm going to meet anyone, it's going to be then. So, Thursday night rolls around, the gala. I look good. I'm wearing a dress, nice heels. It's a nice dinner. We're at a table of random people chatting. And I'm like looking around at all the guys. And I was like, who is it? And the day goes by, the gala goes by, the after party goes by, and I meet nobody. And my friend Tara goes, oh, did you meet anyone tonight? And I was like, no. And she's like, oh, like that's weird. And I was like, yeah. I was like, sometimes psychic information can be wrong. Didn't think anything of it. Friday was a crazy busy day because I had to present twice at the Banff Wellness Retreat, which is when the father came through with the Jerry name. That's important. And then at night, it was the after party for the conference. So we were going right from presenting to the after party. So I'm at this after party and I see this like tall, good looking man playing pool. We catch eyes a few times. Again, don't think anything of it. And then he comes over after we catch eyes a few times and he says, hi, like I just had to come over and introduce myself. Like you're beautiful. Your eyes like really captivated me. I don't know. He said some cheesy line. And I just looked at him and I didn't say anything. And then we went through this back and forth of like just straight up questions. He was like, do you have a boyfriend? I said, no. Do you have a girlfriend? He said, no. I said, do you live here? He said, no. He said, do you live here? I said, yes. He said, where do you live? I said, I own a house. What about you? He's like, I own a house. I said, oh, what about, and we were like going back and forth, like, what do you do for a job? Oh, I'm an engineer. What do you do for a job? I was like, I own my own business. And then I go back to him and I said, what's your name? And he said, Jerry. And I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. And I smiled because I remembered all the things my friend said, all the things that happened in my dream. And I looked away. I remember I looked away and I was like laughing to myself. And he was like, "What's your name?" And I looked away and it seemed like a long pause. I don't know how long it was. And I looked back at him and I said, "Your name is Jerry." And he said, "Yeah, my name is Jerry. What's your name?" And I said, "Your name is Jerry." He said, "Yeah, my name is Jerry. What's your name?" I said, "My name is Steph." He said, "Steph, nice to meet you, Steph." He's like, "Well, I'm playing a game of pool. Like, can I buy you a drink after this game of pool? Like, I have to get to know you. I have to know you." And I was like, "Yeah, Jerry, you can buy me a drink later." And he walked away, and I have this like shook look on my face, like I just seen a ghost. And I run over to my friend, and I was like, "Guess who I just met?" And she was like, "Who?" And I was like, "The guy." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "What guy?" I was like, "The guy I knew I was gonna meet." And then she was like, "Oh my God." And I was like, "Guess what his name is?" Because she sat in on my workshop earlier that day. She was like, "What?" And I was like, "His name is Jerry." She's like, "Oh my God." I was like, "I said that name today in my workshop." And she was like, "Yeah, but wasn't that someone's dad?" And I was like, "Yes, but there are no accidents." I was like, this is a synchronicity with no accident. I was like, "What are the odds I said that name today? Jerry, and his name is Jerry." So anyways, he comes back over, 20 minutes later, and we're still doing the whole back and forth thing. He was just like, "Yeah, I'm older. I know what I want." He's like, "When I saw you, I was just like, holy cow, I have to meet this girl." So we were just like listing things. And then I said, "Okay, Jerry, like, here's a deal breaker for me." He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Kids or no kids?" And then he's like, "Oh, kids, of course." He's like, I have to have kids." And I was like, "Oh, nice to meet you. Goodbye." He's like, "But I already have one." And I was like, "Oh." And then I was like, "Girl or boy?" He's like, "I have one son." I was like, "That's perfect, Jerry." I was like, "I don't want any kids." But it was just like too much. So anyways, he lives very far away from me. I got his number. Who knows if I'll ever see Jerry again. That's really not the point of this. The point was the weird synchronicities that happened leading up to this event, the knowings, the psychic information, multiple people tuning into the same energy, me having those dreams. But it also doesn't mean that just because I had those dreams and a friend thought I was going to meet someone, that like he's my future person, he's it. I know we hold a lot of weight into that, and I could have been like, "Oh my God, like I just met my husband." He was convinced he just met his wife. He was like, "Steph, you're perfect. You're my future wife." I was like, "I don't know about that, Jerry." But anyways, it was very interesting that like you can take this information multiple ways. So yes, I could have just been meeting a person that night. It doesn't mean anything more than that. But it was interesting when these things came true, because it's also like trust those hits that we get, those intuitive hits, those knowing. Even my friend, where she questioned it, like, "Why did I know that? Why did I say that?" "No, but you are going to meet someone." So I messaged her the next day and I said, "I met him." And she was like, "No way." And I was like, "Yeah. And he's older and he has the job and he has the kid and his name was this from this." And she was like, "Wow." She's like, "So cool." I was like, "But he lives 8 hours away." So who, like, I don't really think it means anything, but it was a good confirmation for her psychic knowing. It was a good confirmation for me. And it was really, really interesting. So I just wanted to share that story because I feel like those are the type of stories like we all want our psychics to tell us, "Oh, you're going to meet someone here and you're going to know their names and what they're like." And that's the first time that's ever actually happened to me. I've known I was going to like see people somewhere, like, "Oh, he's going to be there tonight," or something like that. But that's pretty easy in a town like Banff. So this was a fun story and I wanted to bring it to the podcast just for a little fun, psychic fun. So those are the 4 stories, I guess, that I had for you today. Just a fun few weekends at the Banff Wellness Retreat. Always a good time presenting. I love, love, love doing those. They are kind of an extension of the meeting in the middles. So every month I was teaching something, and I usually expand my workshops in different capacities depending on where I'm doing them, online, in person, privately, for groups. So if you are interested in any of the replays of my meeting in the middles, they are available on my website. So you can buy the replays and the booklets. They're really, really good. They're jam-packed hours or hours and a half, full of good information. We have some on how to learn to read the Akashic records. I have workshops on how to set personal and spiritual boundaries. Crystals and Chakras 101 are there. How to use a pendulum workshop, how to listen to the universe, how to manifest, manifesting money. I'll leave all the links for those as well down below in the show notes. You can go check them out. But thank you for listening to this week's episode. It's a little bit different. I hope you enjoyed it. A little fun, a little lighthearted. But here we are on our new home on Wednesdays. As always, if you want to book an appointment with me, I offer distance Reiki, Akashic Records, and PSYCH-K sessions. They're all available distance or in person if you are around in Banff. If you are listening to this podcast, I would love and appreciate a rating and a review. It really helps me out in the podcast world grow and expand, and I really appreciate all of your reviews and ratings. You're all incredible for taking the time to do that. But for the first time, I will be saying goodbye, and I will see you next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, our new home on Wednesdays. I'll see you next Wednesday in your ears. Have a great week, everybody, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye.